or at least
well,
Japanese conditions.
you know, look, with regard to our origins, there are fewer important questions, maybe whether there's life after death, and we may find that out when we know more about our origins, so it could all be answered at once. It's an important question, and I can understand the Japanese feel that way about it. So anyway, it was a mystery, and I had to ask you about it. Here's another little item for you. As you know, there were movies recently, Deep Impact, then Armageddon, and now a UPI story in front of me, dated July 14th, today. A new NASA program to detect, track, and characterize potentially dangerous asteroids and comets that could approach Earth is being set up at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. NASA's Near-Earth Object Program Office will try to locate at least 90% of the estimated 2,000 asteroids and comets that approach the Earth and are larger than about 2/3 of a mile in diameter by the end of the decade. So now, all of a sudden, they're in a big rush, Richard, to identify at least 90% of these, which was no big deal. And what are we to imagine? That Deep Impact and similar end-of-the-world movies have driven NASA to suddenly cut loose the money to do this, or what?
Well, I have a more complicated scenario. I began watching this whole asteroid mania, or meteor mania, or comet mania, at least a year ago, with a series of specials that appeared on every major network simultaneously, all within a week. TBS, CNN, NBC, the Sci-Fi Channel. You know, I'm not being exhaustive, but all of them ran, and I have tape copies in the archives of all of these specials that hit within a week, following on print media. The London Economist a couple of years ago started with a cover story in The Economist, of all things, with a large picture of an asteroid and a spaceship floating next to it that was actually a painting by Chesley Bonestell that I, many, many years ago, helped design. I mean, there's a long story. We won't go into that tonight. But it's like suddenly there was this gestalt. And after being ignored, after Gene Shoemaker and his work for years and years and years had been ignored,
yes,
suddenly, simultaneously, on all available outlets, there was this dawning awareness, culminating with a very dramatic dramatization of a news station broadcasting a live interrupt from the Pentagon of a couple of asteroids hitting somewhere over Scotland and England.
Yes.
Airbursts. And then the call letters of the station, by the way, were WENN, when. And this went through, and ultimately you had a gal named Shannon something or other standing in front of New York City,
yes, describing
the impacts coming across the Atlantic, and the solemn voice of the head of Space Guard, which was supposed to be one of these asteroid warning centers, intoning on air that it wasn't random asteroids, as the Pentagon was saying, it was pieces of the tail of Hale-Bopp, and that we were passing through the tail, which in fact does occur now every January 3rd, and that it was those pieces that were raining down and were going to cause untold havoc and destruction. And just as they cut to the reporter standing in front of New York City, there's a huge airburst, and she and New York disappear in a fireball of flame, and the whole thing goes dead. So I'm looking at all this, and then, of course, we have the announcement of Spielberg's movie Deep Impact, and then we have Bruce Willis doing Armageddon.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a rocket scientist, Art, to say, does somebody maybe know something?
I really do agree with that. I mean, I have come to be a believer in synchronicity, and...
Well, I'm a believer in leaks. And a believer in leaks for those who are in the know.
Do you think somebody in Hollywood had a sit-down meeting with somebody way high up in government, probably even higher than the government we've elected, and they said, look, you're going to have to start doing some movies about the possibility of something from space, because...
Well, we had the scare from Brian Marsden, my good friend at the Smithsonian.
Well, I mean, there's another data point, as you would like to point out usually.
Yes.
Yeah, in other words, they said, well, here's something that may hit in whatever it was, 2048 or whatever. Yep. And for a day or so...
it was revised.
Yeah, but for a day or so, we thought maybe baby, that's it.
That's right. Now, remember a few weeks ago we had a remarkable announcement, which was that if in fact an asteroid or comet or something is identified on a collision course prior to impact,
right,
they're not going to tell us.
No, as
Remember
a matter of fact, after that 2048 announcement, NASA sent out a memo to all organizations that get any NASA money that anybody who announces something coming at Earth early, they want 72 hours of delay. Anybody who announces it any earlier than that loses their budget.
And of course, given the uncertainties and the sketchy sky patrols and the lack of money up until this announcement out of JPL, most of the warning you'd probably get would be in the order of 72 hours. Now, if people were alerted, given that most of the stuff that you get hit by is small enough that you could safely get out of the area, you'd want to give some people some warning to leave. At least you would think that someone would want to give somebody warning so they could leave. In other words,
well, it's a mixed message. Let's say it was going to hit Los Angeles. I'm tired of picking on New York. Let's say it was going to hit L.A.
Okay.
Even with the great highways and so forth they have in L.A., they would probably compute, depending on how big the object was, that there would be more people killed in the panic trying to get out than might be killed by the object.
Well, given that a small object, a few tens of feet across, would be the equivalent of a 30 to 50 megaton airburst, and that would effectively eliminate several million people. Even in an all-out mass panic, you're not going to kill several million people, so the numbers there don't wash butt. This is all the downside. The good side is, and this is what I want to talk about tonight, I have just published on the web this very extensive 50-page hyperdimensional paper.
I know.
And I want to go through how what's in that paper and what we already know exists makes this problem, this asteroid impact or comet impact problem, moot. This is a false problem. We are being diverted by somebody from looking at real problems with a false problem. And when we have more time after the top of the hour, I want to go through what we can do.
All right, well, I will say this much, and that is, hold on, Richard, that those who have read Richard's paper have declared it to be a sound, scientific, easy to understand, well-written paper. It's on the web now, and if you would be so kind as to, for all the other reasons, go up to my website, which is www.artbell.com. Scroll down to Richard Hoagland's name, jump across to the Enterprise website, and read some of it. Let's see what you think. I am told by those who have read it that it is good, well-written, sound, and scientific. So, with that, Richard C. Hoagland back when we are.